Born in Jamaica, West Indies, Dr. Hall immigrated to the U.S. upon completion of her high school education. She earned her bachelor's and master's degree from Brooklyn College and doctorate of education from Fordham University. Prior to coming to Atlanta, Dr. Hall worked as superintendent of the Newark Public Schools and deputy chancellor for instruction in the New York City public school system. When Dr. Hall became the 15th appointed superintendent of the Atlanta Public Schools on July 1, 1999, she promised to transform the district into a world-class school system using nationally proven reform models, facility upgrades, and business operation redesigns. 6 years later, standardized test scores are on the rise. Aging facilities have been renovated, and a new blueprint for business operations is being implemented. Continuing the mission she began, Dr. Hall's vision, APS 2007, states that in the 2007-2008 school year, the Atlanta Public Schools will be a high-performing school district with 100% of schools meeting or exceeding 70% of their annual growth targets. Dr. Hall serves as chair of the advisory board of Harvard Urban Superintendents Program, a mentoring organization, and a member of the Commission on Teaching, which develops specific policy recommendations to deal with teaching crisis in America. Dr. Hall also serves on the board of AETC, the Atlanta Falcons Youth Foundation, Community in Schools, and the Junior Achievement. It is certainly a pleasure. Dr. Hall has taken on a very tough task and is just moving the school system by leaps and bounds. She's been embraced by not only the community in general, but the business community as well, and the community leadership. So with warm applause, please welcome Dr. Beverly Hall.
Good morning. Well, thank you, Milton, for inviting me to speak at this monthly event. It is my pleasure to be here today. I also want to acknowledge the members of the AETC board who are here for their hard work on behalf of PBA and the Children of Atlanta. So the board members who are here, if you just wave your hand. I know most of you. Thank you so much for your hard work and your efforts. I am pleased to be here this morning at Public Broadcasting Atlanta to share with you our vision of the Atlanta Public Schools, and how these assets in particular that you have here can support the district's educational goals. Milton knows that when I came in 1999, there were a lot of things on my plate, to say the least, to put it mildly. But he kept really hammering away at me that over here, WPBA, WABE, where we had vital assets that could help us with our mission of transforming the school system. When I was not in Atlanta, clearly, when WABE joined the airwaves in 1948, and when WPBA, Georgia's first public television station, signed on the air in 1958. But I have come to know that these stations are very important to the Atlanta community. And of course, we also have Channel 22, which is another valuable component of PBA's assets, offering educational offerings and community-oriented programming. Some of you know that there are only a handful of public school systems in the nation that actually own the license for a public broadcasting station. New York City happens to be one where I've served most of my career, and of course now Atlanta is also one of those school districts. And we're really now very proud of our affiliation with PBA. WPBA, WABE, and Channel 22 is contributing to and will continue to contribute to our vision of becoming a world-class school system. And those of you who work here should know that you are helping us achieve our goals by ensuring that you have quality educational-based programming that broadcasting here to the citizens of Atlanta. And you should also know that you make me late some mornings because I sit in the car listening to NPR because something's going on and I can't seem to get out, and people are watching and saying, isn't she ever going to get out of the car? And I'm not on the cell phone. I'm actually listening because the program is so engaging. There are many areas in which we can partner together, I believe, to look for opportunities to bring better programming into our classrooms. In fact, you should know that the district now has a project team that is dedicated solely to examining how to make the most of these resources. And we want to thank John Weatherford, Mike Halpin, and Bernice McLean for serving on our project team. And thank you, Milton, for supporting this initiative. When my senior team went on their retreat at the end of the last school year to evaluate what we had accomplished and then to look toward what we ought to be focusing on, the use of these assets bubbled to the top as one of the areas that we really need to spend some time looking at again to see, are we maximizing the potential of the offerings that are available to us, and this task force is doing just that. Whether it's looking for educational programming that aligns with our curriculum, holding workshops for teachers, exposing students to classical music or NPR programming, or looking for ways to involve our students in the world of broadcasting, we're exploring through this task force practices to make the APS-PBA partnership even more valuable in the future. A good example, I think, of our working together is Grady High School's participation in the youth radio program on WABE. We're very proud of that program, as I'm sure you are. These students have won several awards for journalism based on that work, and they're able to gain hands-on experience which will serve them well either in college or in the workplace. And one of the research findings around high school students, if surprise, surprise, is that the more they're engaged in meaningful work while they're studying the curriculum, the better they seem to do and the longer they seem to stay committed to school. When they can't see the connection between what the teachers are teaching and what's happening outside of the classroom, we have a lot of problems engaging them. And this is a real problem for Georgia. Just to throw out one statistic, if you remember nothing else, I hope you'll remember this. In 1997, in the state of Georgia, over 17,000 African-American young men entered high school. 4 years later, not even at graduation, but just in their senior year, a little over 5,000 of those students were left. 12,000 walked out of classrooms, high school classrooms, which tells us that we have a serious issue in terms of keeping our young people engaged. And as a society, we have a serious issue if we intend to remain an economic superpower in the world. But I look forward to hearing the project team's recommendations and to continue to work closely with Milton and his team so that we can implement best practices in terms of the use of these assets to help us with our educational mission. Just as those of you here at PBA work to provide quality program to Atlanta, we in the Atlanta Public Schools are singularly focused on providing a quality education to 51,000 students. We know that our schools need quality teachers. I served, as you heard in the introduction, on the Teaching Commission. I continue to serve on the Teaching Commission. One of the key findings, and the Teaching Commission report is available on the internet, is that if students, regardless of background, have 3 years of quality teachers, they will perform at the same level as their more affluent peers, and they will be successful. So we need quality teachers. We need quality curriculum. We need quality instruction. And to have that happen, we need capable leadership. In my time in Atlanta, we started with 97 schools when I got here. We're down to 85. We have 85 new principals. It doesn't mean that every single principal is new. It means that in some cases we have changed out more than one principal in the school since we're here. But overall, 85 of the principals are new since 1999. I don't care what a superintendent does, what a school board does, what the public demands. If you don't have a principal, having been one, in each school who buys into the vision and the mission and who has the capacity to do the work, it will not change for the children in that school. So we're focused on teacher quality, on capable leadership. We're also focusing on trying to engage our parents in their children's education because we need their support in our improvement efforts. The work is not easy, however. but it's also immensely rewarding. Another key data point that you might want to think about, or some key data points that you might want to keep in mind as you listen to this. We had the Kenneth Cole Fellows from Emory University look at the parents in one community that we serve, and it was the Hollywood Courts community. And they discovered that 98% of the children in that particular community are in single-family homes. 98% qualify for free or reduced lunch. The average age when someone becomes a parent in that community is 19. 63% of the adults there are unemployed. And of the ones that are employed, they earn an average of a little over $7,000. This came out of Emory University last year. When we looked at that, we said, this is unbelievable. And then we heard from the Annie Casey Foundation that in Mechanicsville, they did a study, and the data was very similar. Then we had Katrina, and people were stunned to see the poverty in New Orleans. But I submit to you that in every city in this country, the images that we saw when Katrina hit New Orleans, we could see if a disaster were ever to force it into the light of day through CNN or any other media. And yet these are the children that we believe can absolutely be taught and can absolutely succeed at high levels, because we're demonstrating that all over Atlanta when we're seeing a really superior achievement in some of our poorest schools, meaning located in very challenging environments. The Secretary of Education, Margaret Spellin, came here in August to visit Capitol View, because in Capitol View Elementary, 90% of the kids live in poverty, 90% of the kids live in single-family homes, and 90% of the kids are exceeding the state average on all tests. She's returning on Monday. She's going to Gideon's Elementary. Now, she's coming twice to Atlanta. Gideon's again in the Pittsburgh Community Center, very poor children, where the children are outperforming their peers across the state in math and science. So I'm not giving you the demographics to say it can't be done. I'm giving it to you to say that it is challenging, but it can be done, and when it's done, it is tremendously rewarding, not just personally, but for this community as a whole. When I came to Atlanta in 1999, I did pledge that we would turn the school system around. The district had suffered from a revolving door of superintendents, and it lacked clear focus and direction, and it was not focusing on student achievement. And I think we have heard that now from independent studies, so that I can say that very clearly. I was the 5th superintendent in 10 years. And I am the longest lasting since Lonnie Krem, who some of you may or may not recall. It takes time to focus on excellence. If I was an employee and Beverly Hall came into town after 5 superintendents in 10 years, what would I do? What would you do if every 2 years Milton was gone, somebody else was in here? I said, this too shall pass. If I just, head low, pencils high, I'm okay. Let her say whatever she wants to say about improving education. This too shall pass. And we know, and the research says, that educational reform is not a fast process. If it was, we would have fixed it a long time ago. It really takes focus. There are no quick fixes. And it takes focus not just from the superintendent, but from every employee in the system. And for that focus to really come about, you have to stay long enough to drive the reform deep enough within the organization that people can buy in. And I have said since I came here that educational reform is a marathon, not a sprint. My first press conference, I remember saying, and the media was in there, everybody was in there, new superintendent, and I said, I'm not riding in on a white horse to fix it, but it is going to take total community engagement in this effort, because I had looked at what had happened in Atlanta over the years, and I knew no single human being could ever come in here and be foolish enough to think by themselves they could do it. But I'm here today to tell you that we're making real progress, and we're making real progress because lots and lots of people stepped up to the plate. Milton mentioned the corporate community. Clearly the corporate community had a real economic interest in the school system. And it was also clear to me when I came that they were totally frustrated, that they had tried in many ways to support the system, but they were getting no return on their investment, and they were just about fed up. My first meeting with the Action Forum, which is a gathering of the big CEOs I'll use as the first chapter of my book, when Pete Carell, the CEO of Georgia Pacific, after he listened to this wonderful speech, the vision speech that they teach you at Harvard that you give when you come in, just got up. And I knew him. I'd met him during my transition, but I did not see how agitated he was until he began to speak. And by the end of his delivery, he was almost shouting. And he was shouting about the fact that superintendent after superintendent had come in, had laid out a blueprint, had asked for support, had told them over a period of time, everything's fine, and then he would wake up one morning and they'd be gone. And he was saying, everybody in this room, Dr. Hall, just tell us what you want us to do. We will do anything at this point to make this thing work. And he turned around, and all of the gentlemen got up and gave him a standing ovation. The frustration level in the room, it was palatable. And think of me. I'm coming in. I used to say I'll never go south of the Mason-Dixon line. Here I am. I know nothing about Atlanta. And first of all, one of the first things that struck me coming from the Northeast, there were only 2 women in that room. And all the power brokers were in the room, and only 2 women. For the ladies in here, you can appreciate that. And I'm giving this wonderful speech. Greg Barranco has introduced me and blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly I have this man screaming, and then all the people getting up and and I said, fine. I will tell you what I need from you. I said, but if I tell you, then I expect from you that you'll do something about it. And to their credit, I have gone to them over and over. We meet quarterly in a smaller subset of that group to talk about critical issues. They bring no staff, I bring no staff, and they move on to try to do what they can with their collective power to help to move some of the roadblocks and the issues. I also reached out to the community-based organizations and the civic organizations. I went to the 100. We were very fortunate then to have a president of the 100, Black Men of Atlanta, who really saw the need for them to step up also and be at the table and be a player. And they were supportive. I went to the Concerned Black Clergy and I said, look, I need the support of this group. I need you to just give us a minute. To suspend disbelief, and I believe that we're going to focus on all the children of Atlanta, because a part of what we discovered was this feeling that the North Side was getting all of the attention versus the South Side, etc. We launched Project Grad. Project Grad was our signature reform initiative, and that's focused only on the children in the most challenging environments. We started with the Washington High School feeder cluster. We expanded to Carver and to South Atlanta. And I think over time, everyone realizes that this is not about South Side and North Side, but this is about giving all the children of Atlanta, regardless of where they're located, what they need so that they can graduate and have options, because there will be absolutely no future for them if they cannot graduate from high school prepared to go on to college or technical schools. So again, I can tell you today that we are making real progress. The comprehensive school reform models that we put in place 6 years ago are having very positive results on student achievement. Nowhere is it more evident than in the elementary schools. When I came here, of the 4th grade, which was the only grade then taking the state's CRCT competency test, criterion reference competency test, that grade was 18 percentage points behind the state average. And let me just say, because I've said it publicly, that test is not rocket science. Those of us who went to real high school, real aggressive elementary schools, we could pass that test in the 2nd grade. But it's Georgia's test, and that's what the kids are measured on. And yet we were 18 percentage points behind the state. The state's average has increased over the first 5 years. They did not sit still, thank goodness, kept increasing. We have narrowed the gap to 4 percentage points. That's why the Secretary of Education keeps flying back and forth. What is going on here now that's allowing us to close that gap? And I can say to you very emphatically that by 07-08 we will close it. We will no longer be below the state in Atlanta Public Schools. When I came here, if I'd said that, people would have thought I was absolutely crazy. It was the accepted norm that we would always be behind the state. That is not the reality anymore. We're now 4 percentage points at the elementary school. And even though we know that for us to really see the kind of progress I'm talking about, we have to wait for the children to pass through the elementary school, the reform agenda, and move into the middle and high schools. And the first graduating class that will actually have been here from kindergarten through 12th grade under my tenure will graduate in 2013. So most of the middle and high school kids were well along their way before I even got here. We are beginning to see changes in the outcomes at the middle and high school as well. Our Georgia graduation high school test results are the highest they've been in 12 years. They're not where they need to be, but they're the highest they've been in 12 years. Middle schools still remain a tremendous challenge for us. And again, even though I've changed 85 principals, I've changed 9 out of the 10 high schools and the larger, just about all of the elementary, but the ones that have been the most difficult to change out of the middle schools, because that's the hardest group for which you can find replacements. I believe, and part of the reason I'm here as superintendent is because I chose to be a middle school principal. And I think once you've done that job, you can do just about any other job in America. If you want a real challenge, there it is. Because, of course, you know about those of you who are fortunate to either remember yourselves as middle schoolers or have middle schoolers at home, you know what I'm talking about. So, but we are taking on the middle and high schools very aggressively. The Gates Foundation came to us and they said, look, we are beginning to figure out, we've been giving money for high school reform across the country, but what we did not pay attention to was the feeder pattern. And we're not seeing as much success as we would like for the millions we've been pouring into Chicago and New York and other places. We're watching your elementary scores. And we think if we could come in now and really focus on your middle and high schools with a lot of intentionality, that you will then begin to see that same growth at that level. So this year, they have given us a $1.4 million planning grant. We now are working with the help of McKinsey & Company to come up with a blueprint for the overall redesign of all of our high schools. And Gates is going to help us to fund breaking these large schools into what best practice shows is the best way to do it, into small learning communities or small schools, and to have dedicated staff who will know Paul by name. And if Paul doesn't show up for 3 days, he doesn't disappear into the great abyss, but there'll be a social worker who can call Paul's home and find out what the heck is going on and figure out what Paul needs in order to get him back into school before he's gone 3 months and somebody says, Paul hasn't been here. Anybody know what happened? By then anything could have happened. So that is the very simplistic premise behind breaking up these large high schools and middle schools into small learning communities with dedicated teachers, a dedicated principal where everybody knows your name. And that's the first part of it. Then we have to provide for the teachers the kind of intensive professional development we have provided for our elementary teachers so they can change their practice. Because every teacher I meet wants to do a good job. Never met one who says, you know what, I want to do a lousy job. I don't care if the kids learn. They said maybe 1 or 2 who are a little, who need to go home. But I would say 99% of the teachers I interact with want to do it but may not know how to do it. And they're not going to hand themselves up and say, you know what, I didn't know how to do it. But when we came in, we went to some of our corporate people who said, tell me what you need, and we'll do it. And I said, look, I need a executive on loan to come in and look at the issue of teacher recruitment and retention. If teacher quality is at the heart of this endeavor, tell me what we ought to be doing to stop. I opened that first September with 700 plus vacancies. That is a fact. We opened this past September with 40-something, and that was in areas that nobody could find people to fill, special ed and so on and so forth. So you think about opening the school with 700 vacancies. So I called on one of my corporate supporters, and it was Bell South in this instance, and they loaned us an executive from their HR, senior VP, to come over and find out what is going on with recruitment and retention. Here is another extremely sobering fact. 90% of the teachers said that they came from 5 area colleges and universities. We had been spending a lot of money sending people lots of places to recruit. 90% came from 5 area colleges. And you know what they said? They were totally unprepared to teach in Atlanta public schools. We knew that we had to do something. We couldn't wait for the universities because their bureaucracy, Paul, all due respect, is worse than ours. And their tenure system is worse than ours. So we decided that we had to focus on really reteaching our teachers. And so our Board of Education stepped up, which a lot of my colleagues across the country really are in awe that the board really was as supportive as they were. And Ms. Muhammad was on that board. She's now returning. But you remember me coming with $500,000 for CORE, the Consortium in Reading Excellence, and the board's eye kind of glazing over. But they stuck with it. They had enough faith that what I was saying seemed to make sense, or they may have been under so much external pressure from all those groups I talked about, a combination of all of the above, that they said, let's just stick with it for a minute. And we poured money into teaching teachers how to teach literacy. You would think every elementary teacher would come out of college knowing how to teach reading. Guess what? The teacher said, we don't know. Then in our very, very low-performing schools, the grad schools, we went out to the community. We said we needed $20 million, much of which would go toward teacher training, retraining. And we were fortunate to have a champion in the form of a Dr. George Brumley, who died very unfortunately in a tragic accident. But Dr. Brumley went out, hat in hand, and watched it have been a 5-year campaign. Within 3 years, we closed on a $20 million campaign. Those gentlemen that stood and applauded opened up their pocketbooks, their foundation pocketbooks, and said, here it is, go for it. Now, part of our commitment was that in 5 years after the initial investment, we would take on 80% of the cost, because, foundations don't fund you in perpetuity. They will give you what you need to jumpstart it, but they expect for you to own it. We now are paying 80% of Project Grad's cost. The foundation now only pays for the scholarship component and a few other, the summer institutes, et cetera, the kids now take on campuses like University of Georgia, Emory. This year they'll be going to Oglethorpe. That's a separate story. All of that to say, we poured millions into teacher retraining and training. New teachers coming in, we trained. Old teachers, meaning teachers with experience, we retrained. I met a teacher. The most telling moment for me was my second year. I was walking up the hill to City Hall and ran into a teacher escorting one of our student leaders, because I was going there to speak to the student government leaders. And I said, how are you? I introduced myself, and she said, oh, Dr. Hall, she said, in 30 years, I have never worked this hard. So I said, what happened? She said, they have me standing and teaching reading 90 minutes every morning. I said, oh. She said, you know what? She said, I think this is my last year. And in my heart, I said, yes. Because you ought to have been standing up and teaching a whole day, every day, never mind 90 minutes of reading in the morning. But all of that to say, we have, that's what has made the difference. And we continue to get teachers coming in that really are unprepared. They can't manage the environment. They don't have the expectations that the children can succeed, and we have to keep working at it. We have, again, lots of other things that have happened, lots of partners who have partnered with us. I pick on Paul, but Georgia Tech has worked with us in many, many ways through a National Science Foundation grant to retrain our math and science teachers. But with all of that, the gains have been most impressive in the area of reading. If you look at our scores overall, while there has been growth, we still know that in the area of math and science, we have a lot of work to do. One of the challenges is that it's easier to retrain teachers to teach literacy than it is to retrain them to teach content areas. And what we're finding is young people who major in math and science tend not to choose teaching as a career. Because if they can go on to into the corporate world like a Bell South or wherever, where they can get a much better salary, or they can go into medicine or whatever, chances are they're going to choose some of these other opportunities. There was a time, and I'm glad the time is no longer here, when for minorities, regardless of their achievement level, teaching was one of the few places they could enter the middle class. So we got some of the most brilliant math and science people coming out of particularly the historical black colleges, pouring into places like Atlanta to teach. That's why people say the teacher I had at Washington High School, Dr. Hall, even though it was segregated, was 9 times better than whatever. The reality was that was their option, and they came and they taught, and they were capable of teaching. What we have over the years is the people with the lowest SAT scores choosing to go into teaching. Now, the SAT score is not the only judge of anything. We all know that. But it is a judge of something. And the average of the SAT scores of teachers is lower. It's in the Teaching Commission report. I'm not making it up. Than any other group of professionals. What did the schools of education do? Rather than holding the standards the way they held them when I was in school, they began offering things like math for teachers and science for teachers. When I was going to college, you had to take science in the science department, and you had to take math in the math department, and you had to understand those things to be a teacher. So we watered down, rather than to deal with looking at how we go about getting more people in, taking on the political issues around salary for teachers and benefits and working conditions. We make concessions that only, to me, add to the overall problem. So we have teachers who are being asked to teach, for example, algebra. Where the standards are higher, we now require middle school students to take algebra. Teacher is saying, I don't know algebra. How can I teach a content that I don't know? So we have engaged in sending our teachers back to get recertified in math, recertified in science. And this year we're launching a major math initiative because, again, we have to begin to improve overall math performance of our students. So we are focused continuously on rigorous academics. No one can convince me, based on my own life experience and the experience of most of the people I know very, very well in this world, that there is a child who, that will not learn if they're provided with the right teacher, the right instruction, the right environment. And so we are really committed to continuing to provide ongoing professional development, while the colleges, we continue to dialogue with them to see if they can begin to prepare a better product. We're also, of course, looking at helping our teachers through the use of instructional technology. Next year, we will have an instructional management system that will allow teachers to assess student performance on a daily basis, adjust their lessons. We'll provide them with model lesson plans linked to state standards, all of this so that they won't have to be scrambling to try to do what we need them to do. We want them actively engaged in teaching our youngsters. So, as you can see, education reform is really very comprehensive. There is no single cure. We have to look at leadership. We have to look at our business operations to be more effective so that we can drive more money toward what we need to do in the schools. We have to look at our transportation to see what's happening there, to see if it's really helping or hurting. We have to look at every aspect of the organization to focus on student achievement because it takes everything working together. An independent study was just commissioned by the Atlanta Committee for Progress, headed by none other than the same Mr. Pete Carell, and the mayor in conjunction with Great Schools Atlanta. And simply stated, the report, which was released this past November, and I'd be happy to share either the actual report or a summary with you, found that, I quote, APS is on the right track towards meaningful reform. It also said we're making slow and steady progress, but it takes time and a commitment from the community if the reform is to be sustained. The report also noted that no other urban school district has attempted to do what Atlanta Public Schools is trying to do. So we are in uncharted territory. This is both an exciting as well as an intimidating place to be. There is no blueprint to follow. But I do believe that based on the successes we've had to date and the feedback we're getting from all over the country, people are coming to visit us every day, every way, I think success is possible and is within reach. But again, as I said, it's a marathon, and the problem will be sustaining it and sticking with it. The report says a minimum of 12 to 15 years before you will see the entire system, K through 12, as a high-performing system. But I'm very proud of what has been accomplished through the dedication and commitment and hard work of the staff, and of course from supporters like you who have stuck with us. And part of my coming here today is just to ask everyone to begin to really look at the data and look at the facts and to really help change the perception that this is still a failing school system, because It is not fair to those children and those teachers who are doing such good work in so many of the schools. As a matter of fact, we are becoming a model for the country, and we are on the right track. Is our work done? No, it is not done, but we certainly have turned the corner. I remember in my first meeting with the board, I said that our goal was to raise the floor and then take off the roof. Well, we have raised the floor. We have more students meeting state expectations, which for me is the floor, than ever before. Now we need to move them into not just meeting standards, but every middle-class parent, including me in America, when you look at that child, that baby that you have, you immediately assume they're not just going to meet standards. What do you assume? They're geniuses. They're going to exceed. And so we believe, and we, by the way, we go out to make it happen. If we have money, we send them wherever it takes, the Atlanta Speech School, private, whatever it takes. We provide those mediating structures to make it happen. I submit to you that the challenge now is to raise the roof, to lift the roof. We've raised the floor, we have to lift the roof. We have to move larger and larger numbers of our children into exceeding state standards. And that's the challenge for us. But I think that we can do it. I think we have a school board that's committed to staying the course. At least we have a new board, but I read what they said when they were on the campaign trail, and there isn't one person sitting who didn't say, we appreciate the progress, we want to work to make it even make it a better school system. So with the resources, I had breakfast this morning with a member of the majority party on the educational committee at the state, trying to convince him that what it takes to educate a kid in Atlanta public schools is a little different from what it may take in Cobb. So if we can get our resources, we've been cut, in the current administration, $43 million in austerity cuts before the cut for this year. I heard yesterday we're going to be cut another $10 million through the 5 mil share. With all of that, we continue to press forward because the stakes are just too high for the young people that we serve. So I proudly invite you to visit our website, to read about us, to go to those research documents that I talked about, because we need all of you to help us to make this the world-class system that this city deserves. And with that, I'll just stop and answer any questions you might have. So thank you.
I hope everyone was taking copious notes because there will be an exam. And we do have standards that we want to try to meet as well. We do these environmental scans so that you have a total understanding of all these different areas. Without that type of understanding, you start making assumptions, and most of the time those assumptions are wrong. So we wanted to make sure that we have a wonderful understanding of our school system and the task that has to be achieved. And Dr. Hall is certainly moving the needle forward, and we are just very proud of what you are doing, and we want to be as supportive as we can. We want to be your voice. We want to utilize this institution as much as we can to be a part of your overall mission. So I know that you're on a schedule, but we'd like to take some questions if you can, if you have some.
Dr. Hall, you talked about recruitment being a problem with the school system, all school systems. But could you speak specifically to any initiatives that the school system is doing to recruit male, African American as a teacher?
Well, first of all, the first thing we did, I should say, was that we again commissioned a class on compensation study and contracted with Pricewaterhouse to come in and look at what were we paying and how competitive were we with our region, because the reality is that people, when they finish school, want to earn a living wage. And what we found out that we were behind regionally, but we, over 3 years, with a $40 million commitment from the board, was able to bring all of our salaries up to market rate. So that was the first thing that we did. And as a matter of fact, our starting salary for teachers now is a little over $39,500, which is not a bad starting salary. Much better than when we started. Now, in terms of targeting African American males, here's the issue for us. Dr. Massey once said to me that when he mentions when a student at Morehouse says to him, you know, I'm thinking of changing my major to teaching, he says, you need to tell your parents that, right? That's about fair. They're paying the bill. He says, inevitably, they will fly in from wherever they are in the country to say, what are you talking about? I didn't send you here to be a teacher. That's the degree to which teaching has slipped in the perception of people as a profession that's worthy. And it's linked, everything in this country, unfortunately, is linked to money. And so what the Teaching Commission has said, if we're to really address this issue nationally, the federal government and state governments ought to look at what you really ought to pay people baseline and then provide a merit system where those that do a better job get compensated not by seniority but based on performance, and that performance should be linked to student achievement. So that's an issue for us. People are not, young men, young African American men, thank God now, have more options than they once did, and so it's very difficult to motivate them to want to think about teaching as a profession. However, we have not given up on it. We just met with Georgia State last week to look at how we can, with some intentionality, begin a recruitment effort targeting African American males. But that is the hardest and toughest group to recruit. Even with Teach for America, which you know I've brought to Atlanta, which brings in graduates from some of the most prestigious universities with very high GPAs into teaching, and we've had Atlanta is the second most highly requested site after New York. That's how many young people want to teach here through TFA. We still have lots of students coming in with very few African American males. I address the class each year, the incoming class, and very few African American males. So it's a perception problem. It's not valued, and it doesn't compensate as much as some of the other competing industries do.
Any other questions?
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm going to phrase this as a question. I'm going to phrase this as a comment.
Mm-hmm.
But the challenges that you had mentioned also are challenges that the other 179 districts in the state of Georgia are facing under the leadership of the State Department of Content. And the teacher training issue in trying to implement the Georgia
Standard.
standards. While a little bit has been done in terms of looking at the use of video through satellite, DVD, tape, or internet, really not much has been done to look at how technology can play a role in the training of teachers. And with this facility, it would seem to me, and with universities that do have some capacity, maybe not as much as we desire, but some capacity and content knowledge, that this district ought to be a leader in developing the technology component that could be made available to the state and perhaps co-funded by the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a very real need
Mm-hmm.
of the state. And aligned with that, I think the biggest risk that the new curriculum has, particularly in mathematics, is rejection by the public.
The integrated curriculum.
The integrated curriculum. And I think that the media skills that are embedded in this type of organization could be very useful in helping put out an educated message. So I think there's a lot of potential here, but there's an inertia due to lack of staff and lack of current funds in the budget that has to be overcome to get the ball rolling.
And one of the reasons we put the task force together is so that out of that task force will come what should these assets be providing, and what should we be providing? Because I am very honest, I always am. When I came in here, WPBA was functioning, and I took the attitude, if it ain't broke, leave it alone. I had enough broken pieces. And I was, swimming with the alligators. So we have finally gotten to the point, I believe, both in terms of the leadership at my end, and I think the leadership on this end, where we can actually now think about those kinds of creative and appropriate initiatives. And that's what we're looking for to come out of this work that we're doing jointly. And from all accounts, that work is going forward, I think, with great success. So I'm looking forward to those kinds of recommendations. Then we have to figure out now, like we do with all the others, the cost, and then where are we going to get that funding to do it. So I think we're just at that point.
Carl, would you kindly, in the brief time we've got remaining,
Yeah.
go into a few greater details about our financial situation? I read the interesting editorial by Joe Martin yesterday
Yes.
about where we were.
Right.
His assertion is that not only have we not made up for the cuts
That's correct.
that were made, we're not keeping pace with inflation,
That's correct.
and that the governor's message that we are increasing the amount of money for education is really not accurate at all.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Martin's analysis. I think he's right on point. We have been cut $43 million over the first 3 years of this current administration. Well, I understand that revenues were down, but the QBE for me is flawed because education funding is really a state's constitutional responsibility. And so I would think that even now as the governor looks toward re-election, education surfaces to the top in terms of the budget, the current budget. Education should have been protected if it was indeed that much of a priority over the past 3 years. So even with what the governor is announcing, the offset of that $43 million has not been attended to. So we're going to end up behind, even with what he's announcing as what he's giving to districts. We're not going to make up for what we lost. And the QBE also was supposed to drive 81% of the funding directly to classrooms. That has never happened. And no one has held the state accountable. Now, Joe Martin has formed a consortium to go into court. And we have not joined that consortium because his first focus was on rural districts. But I believe they're broadening their focus now to include the urbans. And I understand, I can't speak for them, but I think DeKalb may be considering joining the lawsuit. When other districts have done that, for example, when Newark, when it was in New Jersey and the Abbott ruling came out of the Supreme Court because parents challenged the funding formula, the per capita for students in Newark went up to $15,000 per child. So Georgia needs to be nervous about this lawsuit because they have underfunded education for many, many years. A lot of it has to do with the history of the state. And their, I think, focus on the fact that they did not need at one point all children graduating from college ready for post-secondary options. That there was a farm industry and other places they could go and make a quote-unquote halfway decent living. But the days are gone now. And that's why we're ranked 49th in the country, and places like New Jersey are ranked 5th in terms of educational outcomes. We have underfunded the school systems, and we have not accepted the fact that to educate kids in urban areas costs more than to educate other kids. That is not to say we should not be very careful where the money goes, because we have to be accountable. I'm willing to be accountable, that's why in today's City Life, you see we've gone to Research Atlanta to say, come in. Tell us where that $11,000 or $9,000 or whatever, depending on who you talk to. John Sherman, it'll be 15. Whatever it is, tell us where the money is going and why is it going there. Are we spending more on guidance than Cobb? I'm going to tell you right now, yes. But if you look at the clientele that we serve, should we not be spending more on guidance counselors than Cobb? So let's put it out there and then let's see what the explanations are and then see how much we really need. Because we have young people, our free and reduced lunch rate went up in Atlanta. You hear all about gentrification and people moving in and taking over. We jumped from 71% of our kids eligible last year to 74% this year. People are getting poorer in certain sections of the city, and we have to begin to put that out there publicly and say what it takes to intervene in the lives of children who are really coming from very challenging circumstances, and in the lives of their parents, because we need to be educating those parents and bringing them along too. We can't do it without them. What does it take? Do we have to intervene and educate parents in some other places? Maybe not to the same degree, or maybe not in the same way. And there's a cost differential. Yes.
Dr. Hall, you talked about the Atlanta Public Schools education reform focusing on reading and sciences and math. What is the plan for the arts in this whole process?
Great answer. We have been fortunate again with the board support that we have not watered down the arts. And as a matter of fact, we've been recognized because most urban systems, when they intervene and put in a rigorous literacy program, they then do away with the arts. But we have been able to maintain and increase funding to the arts over the last 5 years, and we have linked with other agencies who have been coming in and doing work with our teachers to teach the teachers how they can teach the core subjects through the arts. In addition, we have had a lot of corporate support. Turner Broadcasting is very heavy into the arts, and they have given us this year alone $500,000 to support our art initiatives. The mayor, as you know, is very much interested in the arts, and she has jointly with us focused now on this whole cultural experience component of the arts program, where every single student in Atlanta will experience one of the art or cultural venues during their school year. So all kindergartners will go one place, all first graders, whatever. All ninth graders went to the opera. The mayor sat with them, all my ninth graders and the mayor in the opera. Porgy and Bess, and I'm like, oh Lord, will there be a mayor when this is over? They were dead silent once the opera began. I had visions of the headlines, ninth graders, whatever. But they were just enthralled. And so we are very, very, conscious of the arts. And our new schools at Carver, which I did not talk about, it's a $40 million complex, which is now has 5 theme-based high school academies. One of them is the School of the Arts. And again, Turner Broadcasting and the Blank Foundation are supporting us heavily to continue to infuse the arts in our curriculum.
Dr. Hall, there have been allegations, accusations, assertions, whatever you want to call it, that the administrative and bureaucratic component of the APS system on a per capita basis
Exceeds everybody.
Right. Use words like bloated and above the national average and what have you. A, is that true? And B, what are you doing to solve it?
We've heard it. I hate the term bloated administration because I was there talking about me personally, but accepting that that's not the case here, because that would be true. We brought in Deloitte & Touche, and Deloitte & Touche did a comprehensive assessment about 2 years ago, which is also available. It's a public document, where they said that 96% of Atlanta Public Schools' money is going to the schools. And of that 96, a significant percent is going directly into the classrooms. Here's the issue. What the public thinks of when they hear administration is that bloated bureaucracy. What the data shows is that included in that number are guidance counselors, principals, instructional specialists who are in the schools to support teachers and model for them because they don't teach. So by the time they lump all this other stuff into administration, it's absolutely skewed. However, because when Deloitte came out with that, Deloitte was attacked. Deloitte & Touche, that must be wrong because the perception is so strong that I have now gone out with an RFP. We just awarded the contract at the last board meeting 2 weeks ago to Research Atlanta, and it's in City Life today. Come in and once again dig below the number and tell us where the money is going. And if indeed we find there are still areas, because I submit to you there are some areas where we're not as efficient and effective as we need to be, let's set targets, annual benchmark targets that we report on to bring those areas into line. Because while I can justify spending more to educate urban kids, the backbone, the infrastructure, the business operations is no different or should be no different in Atlanta versus Cobb versus Gwinnett. And therefore, if we are, we need to begin to address it. Our use of technology, when I came here, we had We did not have an enterprise system. We had a legacy system. A legacy system, as you know, is paper-driven. It doesn't give you data in real time. We had to have lots and lots of people doing work. We've implemented, since I'm here, enterprise system, a Lawson system, financial, human resources, a student information system, all these systems. But we also have to train people to maximize the functionality. Then we ought to see a reduction in labor force, or we should see higher level skills as opposed to so many low level people. In addition, we have reduced our overall total number of employees by, I think, over 600 since we're here. Many of them came from people who were not seen, but everybody knew were there. Part-timers, contract people, my good neighbor here who can come in and do a little pep talk over here. We have really eliminated much of that, and we don't get credit because it never showed. Those things were always happening. Everybody knew it, but there was no record of it. In nutrition alone, we have eliminated hundreds of part-time employees. And we just have to, because the public is saying, they want a lean, efficient, effective machine. But I'm saying I don't have any money to give back when I do that, which is where I run into problems with some of my more conservative people. I want that money to go to the classrooms because I believe the need is great there.
Let's see if Dr. Hall, I'm sorry.
I know you spoke a lot about teacher quality and how I think that's one of the main ingredients for
Right.
student achievement. And a part of the team that I serve on, one of the focuses that we're looking at is to redeliver and repackage some of the training that's taking place in the school system.
Right. And we desperately need whatever the medium could be that would engage the teachers. There's a lot of online stuff going on, and what Dr. Omi was just talking about. I think we need all the help we can get because it's a teacher, where the teacher meets the child, that it happens. It's at that point that it happens.
Let's
Thank
give
you.
Dr. Hall Dr. Hall, on behalf of your fellow ATC board members and the entire PBA family, Milton Clipper, the WPBA 30, and FM 90, plus the supporting cast, the entire family wants to thank you for being here and informing us of things that we get information about, often flawed. Thank you for correcting it. But most of all, thank you for giving us stability in this system and getting us headed in the right direction. Most of us have been around a while, and we have not been comfortable with where we have been and where we are. And we appreciate your having the courage and the tenacity to begin to move us in the right direction. So on behalf of this team, thank you so much for being here and providing this environmental scan. I don't know if we knew what environmental scan was before we got here. Thank you very much, and we appreciate you, and God bless you. We have one other